Hi, I'm Margaret Fago. Welcome to my class. Today's drawing class is going to be about line and shape. We're going to do some work with contour drawing, both blind and not blind, and then we're going to move into finding negative shapes, negative spaces, which help define the shapes, and doing shapes with no line outlines. So let's just dive in, and I'll get you at the drawing board and show you some demos and have you work at this. So see you there. Bye. Drawing is a way of learning how to see. And once you see it, translate it through your mind, through your body, out into your hand, onto the page. And that thing of seeing and then being able to actually put it on the page takes some learning, it takes some practice, because our lives, we don't worry about these things. We're more worried about whether or not we're going to step over a rock, or if we're going to get bitten by a dog that's coming toward us, or those sort of big things. And we spend a lot of our life ignoring these little small things, but they're subliminal, they're there, we know they're there, and when we draw them we have a sense of whether they're right or wrong. And so it takes some learning and practicing to really put on paper what you're actually seeing, because we have these preconceived notions of what we're seeing. A lemon, okay, this is a lemon. I can see that it's a lemon, and I know that lemons are sort of round with a little pointy end on them, and they've got little dimples in them, and they're yellow. And beyond that, every lemon is a little bit different. I mean, this lemon that I've got here that we're going to be using is fairly small, but look at these lemons. These lemons, these are my Myers lemons, and they've got little bits of stuff on them, spiders and things. But look how bumpy these are, and how this one is almost round, and that one's sort of long and bumpy, and the way they sort of stick onto their stems. And then, lemons that aren't ripe yet are green. They're not yellow. And maybe they're a whole lot smaller, and some of them are round and some are a little more elongated. The leaves can be long and narrow. So every one has its own little personality, its own little differences. And so I'm going to be giving you some photographs of various different views of these three sets of lemons. But for right now, I'm going to work with this one set. Get this dirt off my page. This one lemon, which I've given you the photograph to start with. And I want to sort of show you some various ways to start looking at something like a lemon, or anything for that matter, but a lemon is our good start. So I'm going to start using an HB pencil. An HB pencil is relatively hard. It's going to make fairly tight little lines. If I press really hard on the page, it'll dig holes in the page. Our pencils that I recommended that you buy range from HB to B, and anything, an H with a number in front of it is even harder than HB. HB is about equivalent to what our standard yellow classroom pencil is. You can see this one actually says it's an HB from Staples. But as these get softer, they get bigger and bigger numbers on it. So I don't have the full set here. It doesn't really matter. We don't need the full set. But they go up to an 8B. So my HB, and I'll just do it over here on the side, my line with my HB is fairly small. And if I go and press fairly hard on the page and darken it in, that's as dark as I can get with it. Now with a B, that line is maybe just a little softer. And then when I go to darken this in, it's going to get a little bit darker area. So a 4B, so the bigger the number, the softer and sort of the wider this can draw. And then as I mark this down, you can see there's not a huge difference between 3 and 4B. And then 6B, and how dark that can get. So when we get into doing shading later, these softer pencils are going to be much more important for us. And then we just put a line across here, and we're darkening into that 8B. So the 8B, as you can see, is much darker than any of the others. This actually almost looks like charcoal, but it's not. It's one of my, and there's various different brands you can get. It doesn't really matter which brand as long as you're buying a fairly nice one. So I've got like 3 different brands here. They all work just fine. As long as, you know, they are drawing pencils, you'll be fine. So the HB. I'm going to start with my HB. Now, what I would like to have everybody start with first is what I call contour drawing. Contour drawing is where you're going to be looking at the outside edge of what you have and not looking at your page. If you don't look at your page, it's considered a blind contour drawing. If you occasionally look at the page to sort of reorient yourself, it's just a plain contour drawing. Let's first, I'll do a blind contour drawing. So I'm going to try and be very careful, not look at this at all, and I'm just looking at my my lemon. I'm going to start at the tip of the sort of the nipple on the lemon, work my way around it, work my way up and around those leaves, work my way back, and find my way back to the nipple. Now, remember that these contour drawings are for you to look and see what the details on those edges are all about. It doesn't matter what it looks like in the end. You'll actually be really surprised quite often how close it is to the feeling of what's there, even if it's not accurate as far as size, shape. It might get squished, it might get elongated, it might get separated, but it doesn't really matter. So we're going to start at that tip. And I'm just looking at that lemon as I draw. So I'm noticing that it comes up a little bit. I'm noticing that as we go around this edge, I'm not supposed to lift that pencil off at all. I got to keep that pencil on there. I'm noticing that there's a little bit of roughness to that surface. It's not perfectly smooth. And now it starts coming down the other edge of that lemon. And there's a stem right here. I'm just going to sort of indicate it, and then I'm going to come down that stem. The stem has a little hair sort of sticking up off of it, and then it comes up. Now we're into coming up a leaf. The leaf has a serrated edge that's just a little bit serrated, not very much. Got to work my way slowly and not let my eye go faster than what my hand can do. Don't take it off, Margaret. Keep it on there. So just going to follow along. The leaf starts turning here, and there's a little more serration. There's a tip. And then we come in, and on this side, the way the light's on it, I can see the serration a lot more. It's also the way the other was sort of turning up toward me, and because it was, I couldn't see the serrations on that leaf as much. So now we get serrations coming down here. Follow it around until we get to the bottom of the leaf. We're at the stem. There's another leaf right here. Now, there is a second leaf back there, and I'm going to follow myself back on what I just did and come around and find the edge of this other leaf, which is a little bit behind. When we get to doing shading on it, you will see that it's lighter than. And that goes to the back. And then we're going to have to get back to that stem again. I have a couple ways of doing it. One is to just pick up my pencil and say, I think I know about where it is, which is what I think I'm going to do. So this may or may not be at the right place. Now we're going to come down that stem. The stem is really quite straight in here, but it has a little upward curve to it. There's a place where a leaf got broken off. That stem's going to come down. I'm going to follow this, come back up that stem. Now that's where a leaf got taken off, and then there's a little bend in that stem. Now we're turning out into another leaf, and it's got a serrated edge at this point. You notice how slow I'm going on this. I'm not speeding. I'm going as slow as I can have my eye follow and see all the details. So I'm really wanting to see all of those details. It's interesting that our mind really likes the details on edges. Coming into that stem, now we're on that stem again. There's a little bump in it. Then there's a little sort of fatness where it joins onto the lemon, then we're down in on the lemon. And that lemon has just a little bit of bumpy edge, not very much. It's rounding out, and we're coming up, back up to the nipple. And here we are back at the nipple. Now, as you can see, it doesn't come up at the same place. I didn't do too bad with finding that. My back leaf actually is smaller than what I see over there. The stem crossed itself, but no big deal. But what is interesting is that we're really getting some of this feeling of those edges. So I can do another blind contour like that. And so what I want you guys to do now is to do 2 or 3 of these. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes. You're going to be able to do 2 or 3 of these, and then we'll talk about another technique. I'm going to do another contour drawing, but this time I'm going to not do it blind. I'm going to occasionally look at what I'm doing to readjust where I was. So once again, let's start at that nipple, and I'm just going to work my way up and around the top of this. So I don't want to look at my page very often, but I do want to look at it occasionally. So I'm going to come around to where this stem is, and do I want to? Sure. Well, I've got a couple ways that I could do this. I could do that entire lemon and then come back and add the stem onto it, or I can continue around on that stem. And I think rather than sort of stopping and backing up, I'm going to just do this stem. So now I'm looking just a little bit to make sure I'm going in the right way. There's a little hair coming off of here. There's some little hair type things. And then we're at the stem. Now this is just a little bit rough, and as it gets over the top of this ridge, it gets a little rougher, and then it comes up to that tip. And then now we're going to be a little rougher in here. Some of these are bigger than others, and I'm just glancing every so often to make sure that I'm going to come back to where I started. And so now this is going to come back down into here and find its way to that stem. There's a little small space here, and then my other leaf comes in. Now this other leaf, I didn't quite get it as far out as I'm seeing it going here. So it's about there, and then the other side of this leaf, maybe that needs to be a little bigger there. Now my stem comes on down, curves up a little bit, finds the edge of where that leaf dropped off. Now this, I'm going to pay a little bit of attention. Now my other leaf comes off a little lower than this, and when it hits here it changes just a little. And then my second leaf is right across from that one. And it angles just a little forward. It's still a little uneven on those edges, and it comes in. And I'm still, notice I never picked up my pencil off the page. I am holding that pencil on my page. So, and the reason I want to hold that pencil on my page is that every time I take my pencil off, it changes my concentration. And I want to be concentrating on this as much as possible, and that needs to be a little bit bigger. I don't want to break that concentration because our mind bounces back and forth between observing and thinking about something. This is the big picture observing that you want to be doing while you're doing this, not the analyzing it. You're just putting it down here, letting it happen, and then we've got that end. So when I do that, it's very similar to my first one, but now it's all tied together and doesn't sort of run counter. So that's contour drawing, and then we'll stop. I want you to do a couple of these contour drawings. We'll give you 10-15 minutes to do that, and then we will move on to another technique. We did the blank contour and the straight contour. Now I'm going to do what we sort of call negative spaces, but also sort of relating this shape and angle of this to something else. So I'm going to look at this and go, what kind of basic shape does this sort of fit? And I'm thinking that about a square. So let me draw this square down here. And so I'm trying to make this so that it feels like it's similar to the outside space of what I see there. And what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to have at least 3 points of what's there touch the edges of this. So starting with my contour here, let's see, and I have a leaf that's going to come up there, and the stem is going to be down here. This leaf is going to hit over here. This is going to hit over here. So these are about where things are going to hit on this. So my lemon, and maybe I can go a little tiny bit faster on this. My lemon's going to come in here. Let's just make this lemon. It's got a little bit of a nipple there, and then it's got some shape coming off where the space of this comes, and the stem. The stem runs down in here, and then now my leaf goes up here. And you know, maybe I didn't get my box exactly right, and I need to keep that sort of straight. Maybe this really needs to go a little outside of that box because I didn't really get the shape of it just right. So this is my leaf, and it's got those little bit of rough edges on it there. And that comes in on that stem there. And then there's another leaf back here. And I see a now slightly different angle on this, and I can actually see the other part of that leaf there. Those turn and go back in that way. And then my stem continues on a little bit of an angle down here and angles on down until it hits that edge there. It's not really wide. And then this. Leaf should come down further than that stem, so it comes down here even further. And then it turns in at this bottom. So maybe I didn't quite make that edge. Now, to sort of show what these shapes look like, I have 2 choices. One is that I can make all of these dark, or I can make the background dark so that you can see that shape, this negative shape thing. So I'm going to come in with a 6B pencil here and darken, which do I want to do, the positive or the negative here? Let's just do the positive so that you're seeing the silhouette of what we just drew. The negative spaces become these white spaces around this, so I'm filling in the positive space of the object. And that white space around that becomes the negative space that's between this. So we don't have any shading, we're just making this dark. And this one leaf overlaps that one, so those all become one piece of shape, but there's a little hole of light in between there. This little hole in there. I could have done this opposite and done the background dark. So now we're looking at shapes fit within a space and how do those work in there. We started with line and now we've turned it into a shape. Our next thing on this is to look at this as a shape and how do we start creating shape and not just line. one way is to think about gesture drawing. So gesture drawing, you sort of look at something and think, you know, what direction is it going? What kind of space is it? How does that work? So I'm going to just draw another little box here so that I'm working within that box. And now my lemon, it's not round, it's an oval. So I can be looking at here at an oval, and I'm just doing it a couple of times to get the feeling for this. And then it's got a little bit of a nipple on this end here. So then I start refining this shape and say, oh, maybe it should be just a little bit fatter there, because it helps us to actually see something before we commit to it. And so doing it rough and then refining it is very helpful. So then our stem comes off the end here, and then what does that stem do? It comes at an angle down through here. So let's just look at the gesture of that. It goes up to where those leaves are and then angles off down that way. And then the leaves, what kind of a thing do? They run as an angle through here. So we've got one leaf that runs up through here, and we're just going to rough that out to start with. And then it's got a little stem here at the bottom. Got to rough this out. It starts a little skinnier, gets a little fatter. And so sometimes you can think of rectangles and triangles when you're doing this, and how do those work? And then we have another leaf that runs back in through here that we're seeing from that back side. So now I've got that roughed out. I could come in with an eraser and clean it up and make it neater and tidier, but it has that same feel to it. So that is a gesture drawing. This is working with negative spaces and silhouettes to see what those shapes look like. So now one other way of thinking about this, and this is coming down to shape but not line. Let's do the same thing, a box here so we can see this. And, you know, I'm going to have it hesitate between for you guys, so you can do this one a little bit before we move on, do that one before we move on. So I'm going to make a break when I do the movie. We'll come back and then we'll just continue on with this. And so now the last technique that I want you to work on, and let's move into maybe a 3B pencil so that we've got it. This is where you look at shape, don't put any line down, but you're going to create shape with and I like doing it with little turns. You can also do it with just, you can do it with a crossing like this. So I'm going to just slowly, I'm going to start at the middle of this lemon, and I'm going to work my way out until I've created a dark area that feels like it's that same shape. And then it's got a little bit of a tip out there. So I haven't done any line on this. And then I can make it darker in the middle of this so that it feels more like it's dark in there. Because that's the darkest. There's a little bit of bounce light coming up underneath. And I could just sort of stop that. And then no lines, but we're going to form the rest of this. And so this came at a little bit of an angle through here. Not letting you draw any lines down. You're just forming this, and if it doesn't come out right, hey, it's only pencil on paper. You can do it again. And you want to do it again and again. Best to do it several times. Try it, think about it, and then try it again. And isn't this interesting how with just little circle lines, I can start creating this shape. I could also do this with straight lines. I can do another one and show you with straight lines. So then we're getting this shape coming up into here. So we've looked at this in several different ways, and the more we look at it, the more we see what's there and how those pieces come together and form the object that we're trying to draw. So let me do one more, because I'm going to do this one with straight lines. Basically the same thing as this curly Q one, but using straight lines with it. So I'm going to start at the middle of that lemon, and I'm going to find this space. And I'm going to find how that forms there. And then as I get toward these edges, I'm going to start moving this in a little bit different direction, so that I'm finding those spaces. And then the top of that lemon is actually lighter than its background. So I could come in and start doing some of this on the background as well and leaving that light space of the lemon behind. And then we've got a pretty dark space that comes down into here. This guy needs to get even bigger now. And then we've got a very dark space underneath of this lemon, which is the shadow. And I can fill that in, find it there. And then the stem, it's straight lines, so we can just do that. And then that shape of that leaf as it goes off into the angle up here. So we haven't done any outlines on this. We've just started filling in and finding where those spaces are. And then there's another leaf that comes out here, and it's going to be darker than that shadow I put on the tabletop. And it's going off and out of the page down here. Okay. So, different ways to do this. We've got the contour drawing, which, let me pull that up, make sure that you're getting it, not something else that I had in my book. We started with blind contour, a contour where you are going to pay attention some. So this is getting your shapes down with line. And then we look at using that contour drawing to find what those basic shapes are and then turning them into silhouettes so we just see the shapes and not worrying about light or dark in it. Then we do what's called a gesture drawing, where you're going to just come in and let your pencil move around and find those shapes with some little quick drawing. And you're still basically working with outlines, but you're finding the shapes a little bit different than leaving the pencil on the page and moving it slowly. And then this is finding the shape by not having any outside lines and just finding the shape from the center, working your way out till you find the shape with that shading. This is basically the same thing, but rather than circles for a shading, we've done straight lines, and we've pulled in a little bit of the background shading on it to help that piece sort of stand out. We're getting a little bit of shaping on this with the shadowing. So I'm going to be giving you at least 10 minutes each for these techniques, and at the end we'll look and see how it all worked out. Very good. So that's our lesson for today.